Hey, welcome to the Pressure Washing Pastor Podcast. My name is Joshua, and it is my pleasure to chat with you today about changing the way that you think. I just said changing really weird, but this is what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to say that there's a problem in the way that we think in our lives. And I think not only I think that way, I think Jesus thought that way. He used the word metanoia for the word repentance, and it basically meant change the way you think, and you'll end up changing the way that you live. And so my invite to you is to go on this journey with me as we hear what God is doing inside the lives of other people, how they're spelling out purpose, how they're using purpose at work, and their message to the world before they leave. And you too have a message that you're living. 65% of your life will be lived at work. What are you going to do with it? Are you just going to make money, make gadgets, and end up retiring one day? Or are you wanting to use your time, use that money for a purpose where you can end up engaging the gospel, where you can engage people that are far from God and make disciples and be faithful to what God has called us to do to begin with? And so without further ado, I'm going to bring my friend Anthony Rex into the show. Anthony, what is up, my friend?
Hey, man, it's so good to see you again. So good to see you.
You are looking crisp today.
I'm wondering if I need to turn my hat backwards. Are there any rules on this podcast?
Yeah, just if you do anything crazy, it might get edited, but right now you're just fine. So,
all right, well, good.
Hey, the first question is always the most difficult, and it is, who is Anthony Rex?
Oh, man. Well, I'd like to say it depends on who you ask, but I'll try to be real clear. Hey, I'm a 41-year-old husband and father. That's the highest honor I have after being a disciple of Jesus Christ. Man, I love being a dad. I love being a husband. Is truly the joy of my life. I've actually coming up on the being married half my life. So that's the first place I start.
Wow.
Once I get past that, man, I preached for almost 20 years, every week in, week out in churches, one church for 16 years. And the last 3 years, I have served as the executive director, CEO of a nonprofit ministry that my best friend and partner and I started just post-COVID in the summer of 2021.
Let's go. What's the name of that nonprofit?
Yeah, it's called Be One, Make One.
Oh, juicy.
Yeah, you probably pick up on that pretty quick, right?
Yeah, I love it.
Be a disciple who makes disciples. And, you know, the history of that really goes back not just the 3 years that we've been doing it full time. It's really 20 years. My partner in the ministry, Chip Pugh, he lives down actually by you, Cookeville, Tennessee.
Let's go.
He actually brought me to Christ when I was an 18-year-old punk. I grew up in a tiny church where me and my brother were the youth group. I was pretty disinterested, super into high school sports, friends, all that stuff. And I went to this church camp where I met Chip. He was a Division I football player, completely sold out for Jesus. And I was like, oh, I didn't know these two things existed. And before I knew fancy phrases, Joshua, like relational disciple making and all that stuff, I just experienced it. He invited me into his home, spent a summer with him, not every day, but he just discipled me, led me to Christ, baptized me that summer. Little did I know, he baptized my wife 4 years before I met her.
Let's go.
And so I lived that experience, went on to be in ministry for the next 20 years. And God put a burden on our hearts. We've worked together over the course of the last 20 years in different things and church stuff. And it was always this burden that we experienced on the campus of Ohio University, where, man, we were just students teaching the gospel, baptizing people weekly, preaching on the weekends, just on fire, completely unqualified, but loved it. And left that environment and went into the church and tried to see that revived in the local church, but felt a lot of frustration at times, a lot of, we love the family of God, but wanted to see her be more missional. And so we did some consulting for 3 or 4 years under Be One, Make One, just as church leaders, helping, people who, we say it this way, people who know how to run churches start making disciples.
Let's go. Yeah.
And then God was gracious enough to send us into it full time in the fall 21.
If I would have met you prior to you coming to know Christ, can you kind of paint the picture of who I would have met, the Anthony before you met Jesus?
Externally loud, um, narrative controlling to make sure you thought the best of me, and internally an absolute wreck of insecurity, staying one step ahead of not feeling enough and leveraging enough of my social skills to outpace the fear I had of being caught that I wasn't cool.
Yeah, I appreciate you being vulnerable and open. When you look at that, a lot of times you can go back to your past. When you look at kind of like what was feeding that, are there any events that kind of stick out that, if you feel comfortable, that kind of fed the behavior that was being demonstrated?
Yeah, for sure. I had come from a pretty dysfunctional family situation. I give a lot of honor to my parents. They did the very best they could, and so I'm thank God for them. They both came from very non-believing families. My grandmother died as the drug dealer of the county that she was from.
Wow.
Truly a lot of evil. Training my cousins and uncles to, buy and sell drugs for her, and it was just a really, really tough situation. A lot of brokenness there. And my father came from a similar situation. And those two, for some reason, they moved to a different town when my brother and I were just about to be born. Well, he was just about to be born. I was next. I mean, we were broke, poor, man, on welfare, living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And my mom at 30 years old came down with the flu, and it almost killed her.
Wow.
And she got down to like 70 pounds, was in the hospital. And these old ladies from the church heard about it in our little town and started taking care of me and my brother. And my mom, she was a church hopper when we were little, going and getting like free food from churches and stuff. And then they brought her to Christ and they loved us. And,
Praise God.
isn't that cool?
I'm sorry.
My father was later. He was an alcoholic, and 12 years later came to Christ. And still, I stand on their shoulders. So I'm deeply grateful. They still carry a lot of wounds and some burdens that are not yet relieved. So I'm deeply grateful for their courage to just do something hard, like moving out away from their family. But since then, underneath all that, Joshua, was like, I'm around. I just had this sense like everybody else's life is put together. They have money. I was the kid that got tagged along on vacations with other families. We didn't go, shoes from Walmart, not Foot Locker kind of thing. And that it's not the event, it's the belief that's formed. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was deep in there. And then I learned how to sort of stay one step ahead by leveraging some social skills to try to be funny or be cool or be good at a sport. And that was solving to a degree, but it just never really set me free.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt for a second because we've got a phenomenal opportunity for you. If you've been thinking about opening your own pressure washing company, I'd like to invite you to a free webinar. There we'll talk about the pros and cons of opening a pressure washing, and you'll get to chat with our team about whether or not you should launch a pressure washing company in your city or not. To register for this free event, go to pressurewashingpastor.com, scroll down to the little registration button, it's blue, and click on it, and we'll take care of the rest. I look forward to seeing you there. Have a great day. Now back to our show. That's so good. When you look at yourself, as a young man, you recognize that, first of all, you gave your parents a lot of grace, and so I want to honor you. But it's helpful to notice that you were raised in a dysfunctional home, because sometimes we give so much unawareness or grace that we don't recognize that we were in a condition that conditioned us to be who we are. And poverty mindset is one of those things that when you grow up and have nothing, you don't know how to manage money, and you spend everything that comes in so you can up your status, so you can have friends and influence people the wrong way.
That's right.
And when you look at the gospel, and that's where I want to go right now, is too many times the gospel is this vague invitation, or we don't really know how to share the gospel with somebody. If you were going to share the gospel with yourself, how would you have shared the gospel with yourself, or how was the gospel shared to you?
Yeah. So when I look back, the gospel originally, like what connected me was the demonstration that I was accepted by Chip, like the experience of going like, hey man, I love you. You like get in here. I don't, and you belong and you're part of this. And that set me up to receive, I think, doctrinally information to like go, okay, this connects to Jesus somehow. And I would like to follow him. It's hard for me sometimes to go back because uh, the funny part of my story is I was 8 years into ministry before I really understood the gospel. I learned how to preach and teach, and I'm sure some good was done with that. But I remember where I was sitting when I was 8 years into it, listening to a Timothy Keller sermon. And I don't think it was a knowledge thing. I think it was a experience thing where I finally connected with God is completely powerful and able, and he is on my side. Like he's for me. And I heard this line one time. It said, the hardest thing for a human to do is to let themselves be loved. And it was the first time I just went, oh, I'm just going to relax for a second and let God love me. Because even up until that point, I think I've just found a new way a new, more honorable way to keep striving, and all of that was a beautiful experience of the gospel. But finally it lands that like, man, he accepts me.
That's so good. I remember the moment that for me, there was a moment in time where I just felt like God said, I love you. And for any listener that's out there that's chewing on whether or not you're far from God or where you are with God, the encouragement today or the reminder is that, man, God loves you not based on your performance, but based on Jesus' performance on the cross, which is great news for people like me and you. And so as we transition into ministry, being loved by God and no longer trying to, win his affection, but just be inside of his affection, how has that propelled you inside of like your mission for life? You mentioned be one, make one. Would you mind sharing with me how you work out kind of your purpose in life and what you do inside of this life?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to just maybe calibrate with you is, I've listened to your podcast. I don't know all the different demographics of the people that listen, like where they are in their journey. Sometimes it can feel like these conversations, not just on this one, but I'm on the other side of being finished with my experience with the gospel. And I just want to tell you, man, it's cyclical for me. That requires a reminder. I know, Hebrews talks about running your race. It says the sin that so easily ensnares you, it's singular. It's like, man, I come back to that same needing of the gospel. Even at 41 years old, man, it keeps coming back to that need to calibrate. And I'll say, so to your question, I just want to say, like, to people listening, like, this journey with the gospel never really stops. When Jesus said it's bread, like the word is bread, it really is something that you have to feed on daily, and recalibrate and recenter. It's the foundation on which you stand. And it's not like you stand and then jump. It's like you stand daily. So, to your question though, about the gospel, what I found, Josh, was that like the gospel gave me permission to tell myself the truth that I just didn't have the courage to say to myself, that I was insecure, that I was afraid, that, I wasn't good enough, all of those things that I was just trying to solve on my own internally and hustle and make something of myself. And that created like socially acceptable behaviors, like working hard and being, things like that. But the gospel finally gave me the permission to slow down and go, hey man, like you do feel kind of insecure and you are defensive and you are, so the gospel gave me the permission to diagnose what I was experiencing. I never forget, I was sitting there, reading in the upper room story where Jesus is like, you'll have fullness of joy and peace. And I finally was just honest. I was like, I don't. I experientially don't feel peaceful and joy. So something is true and something's not true. If Jesus said it, why am I not experiencing it? And it was the gospel that gave me the permission to just be honest. I didn't have to pretend. But you got to have the gospel safety to get the gospel truth. Yeah. And so that was a big part of like what really helped me, because in that process, what I come to realize was I never really had clear purpose. I was just trying to perform for people. I was too afraid to sit with myself and the Lord and hear from him and be clear about why I'm on earth.
That's good.
So everyone else was setting my purpose and vision in life. And I didn't feel like settled in that. So the gospel really helped fuel that and give me that permission.
We need to dig into that because I have, we as men experience depression, anxieties, and I wonder if everything funnels from, and when you use the word everything, I know it's wide, but I want us to at least process the question. When we don't have purpose or meaning, even if we have everything inside of our lives, a lovely wife, great family, a job, if all those things are in play, but we're not clear with our purpose in this life or our meaning in this life, I feel like depression is the outflow of not being inside your uniquely designed position. Can you speak into that a little bit as far as like how you landed into your purpose?
Yes. So, depression is the opposite of expression. And when you are healthy and clear and you've sat with the Lord and you have his courage, you then have the freedom to express and become creative. Creative is just us sharing ourselves with the world in a way that serves, however you do it, whether it's building a pressure washing business or writing a book. And so that's creativity. And I find myself prone to that depression when I'm like holding back and trying to solve some of those internal wounds of sin. So the wounding of sin, in scripture talks about how sin wounds us. It's the things I do, the guilt I feel for what I've done, but it's also the things that I've experienced from others that cause me shame. We develop beliefs about ourselves. You talked in the open. I was able to listen when you're talking about metanoia and the change of your mind. What I really have come to realize with the gospel is that you'll never outpace the paradigm and the view you have of who you are. And so for the longest time in my life, was a graveyard of great ideas. I mean, give me 5 minutes. I got a great idea. Here's how we can make money. Here's what we could do for the kingdom. Here's a book we should write. But I called them a graveyard because those ideas just would die not because I couldn't figure out how to do it or type on a piece of paper, but because I was manifesting the belief of who I was. I had not yet let Jesus give me a new vision, his perspective of who I am. And so I was always going to live out. Am I tracking with you?
Man, it's powerful. Like you are giving nuggets right now. Your paradigm will never outpace your, go ahead, fill it in.
Oh, okay. So you will never outpace the belief you have of who you are. So for example, the reason people like struggle to lose weight or to manage money, you talked about poverty mentality. You will use your money the way that you think that who you are. So if you're like, you always have a car payment or, like working for the man, working for the weekend. Good. If you have that mentality, even if I give you $1 million, you're still going to treat it like that person.
Yeah. And
so I learned just recently, I now speak in present tense of what I envision my life to become. So for example, my wife and I got married young, love each other dearly, serve each other, but hit a season where we weren't always enjoying each other. I was trying to fix her. She was trying to fix me. We were trying to do right, but like feeling that, okay, you're married, you smiled.
We're not supposed to fix each other.
So I started writing in the present tense. My wife and I are best friends. We have a keen insight of what each other enjoys, and we just love being together. Before it was true, I started writing that. And what I've learned to do is when I have thoughts come through my mind, Joshua, that are not that, I've learned to become the CEO of my mind. I just simply go, hey, I decide what gets funded in my business, in my brain. Yeah. And I just say reject now. That's not what I'm thinking about. If I get off this podcast and I have a thought going, man, Joshua thought I was stupid, and I reject, I don't have to engage that.
When I first started my own pressure washing business, I did not know what soft washing was, nor did I know marketing, sales, or even how to manage my finances.
Take the guesswork out of it. We have taken all of the knowledge we've gotten and wrapped it into video courses. It's a 7-figure blueprint for a pressure washing company that you can get at pressurewashingpastor.com. Go there, scroll down to video courses, and purchase it. We guarantee you'll get the value or your money back.
So go ahead and click pause, head over to the website. Now, unclick pause and back to your show. That's so good. It's interesting how our minds lie to us because a lot of times it's we make up the narrative of what we believe about ourselves and think other people think that about ourselves. And really it's to free ourselves from the bondage of what we think about ourselves and just receive what Jesus actually thinks about us. And it's like take every thought captive to the obedience of the Lord is a powerful way to capture every thought, about yourself, about others. And I love the way that you worded that. I believe you said something to the effect of your paradigm will never outpace your belief system, something to that effect, and which means we have to have a paradigm shift. And we know that the only way to do a paradigm shift is Romans 12:2, where it says we have to renew the mind, the phroneo of our minds. And it's like, we don't do it. We even pastors, anyway, I can rant, but it's like we as people struggle with not allowing the attention of this world to take our attention. And so like be one, make one, we know that works. The word that I feel like God's been speaking to me is fill up, pour out. It's like you can't give what you ain't got. And if you desire to be who I want you to be, you got to fill up on me. And it's like you got to fill up and pour it out. And when you pour out, you feel God's presence in your lives, and so do other people. So,
man, I first of all, everyone is already a disciple maker. You make what you are. Like if I come to Goodlettsville, Tennessee, right? Woohoo, Dollar General headquarters.
Let's go.
And I go, and I want to get some Italian food tonight. What's the best place? And if you have a place, you'll tell me about it. You might even go with me.
Maggiano's is where we'd go. It's Nashville. We'd get lasagna and we'd have a good experience. We'd eat a bunch of salad, some bread, and then we'd go grab a cup of coffee, play some games. It'd be a good night.
You just made me a disciple of that place, right? Because you believe in it, you love it, and you're sharing it with somebody. We already do this. Disciple making is not just a command. It's a diagnostic thing. It tells you what's going on in you. And so to your point, like, you have to be in the secret place with the Lord. Yeah. I think about Jeremiah, Jeremiah chapter 1, that dude was scared of his assignment. He was afraid. And the only way he got courage to answer his assignment was spending time with the Lord in private. That's how we're always going to feel that way.
Yeah. Keep going.
Well, the other thing I want to add about the belief and the mind is the mind's kind of a hard thing to figure out. It feels complex, but the reality is it's just the pictures that your mind makes pictures. So if I say childhood bedroom, on people's minds, a picture comes to it, right?
Yeah, it was a purple room. Charles Barkley's was on my wall, and I had this dart BB gun, and I would shoot Charles, on the wall, not realizing I'm putting the holes on the other side until you got to move. But yeah, I see it.
I have a picture of it, right?
I got it.
Okay, so if I say 5 years from now, Joshua, what picture do you have?
Man, I hope I'm doing more of this. Really, like in my head, it's clear. To lead a movement of ministers in the marketplace, or at least be part of the movement, because we don't lead it. We're in partnership with what God leads, and I just want to be a part of where God is, and I feel like that's where the pace is. 1,000 ministers in the marketplace over the next 10 years.
So can I add one piece to this?
This
is my experience, okay? I never gave myself permission to have vision. If you sat me down and said, hey, make some goals for next year, I couldn't do it. Because I grew up, now, again, love my parents, but this is what I experienced. I grew up reacting to other people's urgencies, and my life existed for the fixing of other people's problems. And so, this is a trauma response at a young age. Myself, who I am, just dipped out, said, see you later, man. Like, in my parts, fixer, helper, explainer stepped in and made the environment safe. And those parts learned to run my life. And I'm not a therapist, so I encourage people if they need to get into therapy to do that. But my point in saying that is that creates deep, deep insecurity. And what the Lord shared with me a few years ago, Joshua, is that insecurity is not humility. To just go, oh, shucks, I don't know. Like insecurity is a sign that you haven't spent time enough with the Lord to know who you are and what you're called to do. And so don't hear shame if I'm, people listening. This is not a shame and guilt thing. This is a diagnostic hope thing. Insecurity is not humility. Being clear about who you are and clear about what you're called to do. I was afraid, Joshua, for a long time to guess wrong on vision and goals, because what if God changes his mind and I can't make him happy if I pick the wrong thing? Does that make sense?
For sure. Because you don't want to let him down.
Yeah. But I had a picture of him and me that was, I exist just to make the mean, grumpy man happy. So I got to guess right because he won't tell me, and just hope that I get it right. And that vision of myself, when the gospel started to give me safety, the hierarchy of needs, safety, security, assurance, then I could calm down and step in and go, who am I? And like, what is my contribution to the world? Like the best definition of spirituality, I think, is your contribution to the world. How do you contribute to what God's doing in the world? So anyway.
That was great. You just ended it with like a powerful statement that I now want to dig into that, but I already had like this other, thought in my head. So super good. You lead an organization, or you and your friend lead an organization. It's called Be One, Make One. In a nutshell, would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Be One, Make One, we originally started to help churches become disciple making in their actual DNA and culture, not in a program, but in the culture. And so what we started doing was, coach, you got to get to the leadership, because the church won't outpace the leadership, just like the paradigm. They set the paradigm. And we would we kept coming across leaders who, again, we say it this way, knew how to run the program of a church, but didn't know how to like sit with somebody and make a disciple. And they weren't having any fun doing what they were doing. The reality is disciple making is a great thing. It's so fun. It's the joy of being a believer. And so we started coaching churches to help them, like the leaders, to help them become disciple making. And what God over time has done is shown us how to it's expanded outside of just church, just helping churches, like consulting in that way, to, we just want to train leaders. We call them on-mission leaders. Whether you're, work for Brown's Power Washing, or you're an athletic director at a college, so we built programming to help coach people to live on mission with Jesus. We teach people what we call the 6 skills of Jesus, playing off a little bit of like your habits are your architecture, right? And so Jesus had 6 skills, more than that, but these 6 we dial into. Speak your purpose. So Jesus he said, I know where I came from. I know where I'm going. He knew exactly who he was and why he was on earth. I am, and that's why I'm here. I have come. And so we teach people the purpose is there's 5 things that come together: your identity, your history, your covenants, who you've been called to serve, your design, and your assignment. And we got a process we take people through. If you get clear on that, you can speak daily over your life affirmation of your purpose.
Wow. Second
skill is know the word. So we really guide people into not just Bible reading plans, but sitting with the Lord and hearing him. Third one is invest in the one. So lift your eyes, see who you can invest in today. The widow that you can say, can I pray for you? The fourth is lift your heart. That's our prayer acronym. Because what we found is a lot of, I think Satan really manipulates leaders' responsibility gene to make them feel responsible for everything. And so they're walking around with 2 5-gallon buckets full of rocks, carrying the weight of the world, trying to figure everything out, and they don't just lift it to the Lord. So you got to know your heart and then lift your heart to him and trust it. The 5th skill is the L is live in community. All the different sizes of community with the Lord, discipleship group size, small group, all the way up. Are you living in community with people? And the 6th one is share the message. Can you share how his story changed your story?
Yeah, so
we teach those skills. Yeah. So that's a quick one. And then the secondary thing I do want to share is that we are planting churches that are for campuses. We didn't go to seminary, Chip and I, no Bible training. we were just trained on state universities, and we believe it's an incredible mission field. And so we plant churches on and near campuses with a model that is very mobile. We encourage the planters and the staff to have jobs on campuses, so they're not just needing a ton of money. And just over in Cookville, where Chip is, this past Sunday, there was 180 there, 110 students. It's awesome, man. It's the same movement. So that's what we do.
Did you guys create that whole framework and process? Like, did y'all find that somewhere, or is that something that y'all? Yeah.
Chip is a trainer by his profession. So he was a Division I athletic strength conditioning coach for several years. He actually trained. He was the first CrossFit trainer for Rich Froning. Introduced CrossFit to Rich Froning to CrossFit. If anybody knows him. Yep. Awesome guy. And so Chip has been a trainer, big habit guy, system, routine. I mean, he's disciplined, and so we developed these over the last 5 years together, and we found them to be, if you commit to these skills over the time, you'll see yourself naturally become a disciple who loves Jesus, receives his love, and makes other people become disciples.
That's so good. Who's all called to be a disciple maker?
Every single person, man. And it doesn't look the same, like not everybody's an evangelist, meaning like, the APEST gifts. Not everybody's a shepherd, but in different ways, but everyone can do those skills and in their way make disciples.
That's so good. If someone was interested in digging into those resources that you just shared, is there a website or is there anywhere that they can go to maybe learn more about what y'all teach?
Yeah, we just got our website launched, new one, B1, BE numerical 1, MAKE numerical 1.org. And we're just now getting off the ground. We call them discipleship guides. They're enough material to get you moving, but enough margin to let God work. So it's enough stuff to get people going. And it teaches the steps to Jesus, how to become a Christian, and the skills of Jesus, how to follow his lead and practice his ways, those skills. And then we have deeper training engagement as you grow.
And you guys are on the campuses of many of the universities or colleges trying to teach discipleship to the local students.
Yep. We're trying to plant churches, holistic, intergenerational churches on campuses for the campus. So we want to reach the women's golf coach just like the student that's studying accounting. Wow. And it's happening. And so the goal is to bring these students in and let them be reached for Jesus, be shaped. Like the safety of a church home is where their minds need to be shaped. And so they're loved on and cared for. They're given opportunities to grow. And so our dream is that they get a degree in accounting, they move to Nashville, and they're on mission because they've experienced, and they show up at your church, or they show up, and they know how to do it, and they're ready to be an accountant who's on mission in the marketplace.
Yeah, so good. If you didn't know by now, we have created the #1 video courses on starting and scaling a pressure washing company on the market.
That's right. But head knowledge will only take you so far. You need the hands-on experience.
So what we crafted for you guys is an Experience Nashville 3-day boot camp. 2 days in the field, learning everything as it relates to pressure and soft washing and how the systems work, and 1 full day of breakout sessions with Joshua and myself. Visit pressurewashingpastor.com, scroll down till you see a link to my calendar. We will grab a call together and figure out how to get you here to Nashville.
And then we will see you in Nashville.
Back to the show.
If you had one message to share with the world before you died, and you can only share one thing, what one message would you want to share with the world?
Find the humility and courage to let the love of Jesus shine light on everything that your heart is looking for. Wow. And if you do that, you'll find that he's not just a hallmark answer, he's a practical, real answer for you.
And will you dig into that for a second?
Sure.
Yeah, when you say that your one thing is for you to have the humility, and then use another word to allow courage to allow Jesus to just love you. Yeah. Why is that not the natural progression of thought?
The resistance to being loved is an expression of pride, whether we like to say it or not. So, for example, if you take a spectrum and on one end you write self-love and on the other end you write self-hate, and I asked you, hey, Joshua, where would you fall on that spectrum, left or right, self-love or self-hate? You kind of float, right?
Yeah,
some days you may,
sometimes.
What's that?
I would probably be 90% inside the love area, but then there's like 10 or 15% where it's like, you're an idiot. You just failed with your kids. You just failed with your wife. Yeah, da-da-da-da. So I'd say there's a float, but I'd say the majority of it is like,
you're doing awesome
over here.
And most people in our world today can name 10 things on self-hate before they name one on self-love. And so here's the tension, though. Those are two sides of the same coin. What's the first word in both?
Self.
When you look at a mirror and you love it or you hate it, both people are doing the same thing. They're looking in the mirror obsessed with self.
Yeah.
And here's a hard pill I had to swallow. Self-hate is a form of pride. You're obsessed with yourself. You just don't like what you see. So the answer is not come into the middle and self-like. Because we don't like the self-love guy can be arrogant, right? And the self-hate guy is like in despair. And both extremes are unhealthy. The answer is to come off that spectrum where it's self-forgetfulness. And so it takes humility to let yourself be loved. The self-hate guy has to go, even though I know these things might be true, I fail with my wife or my kids, or I'm not, I messed up today. The cross of Jesus proves that God still loves me. The self-love guy has to have humility to go, hey, I think I'm awesome, but he still had to die for me. Both people, humility and then courage to step to the cross and let yourself receive his love. And when you do, 1 John says God is light before he's love. He shines light to show you everything you're looking for, every insecurity, every fear, every doubt, and he begins to heal you that way. That would be my message. Find humility and courage to let yourself be loved.
Yeah, if someone's listening, but they're like, man, I want this, but I don't know how to get this, what advice or what tools, is there any how-tos as far as letting yourself be loved by God? Because if it be true, there has to be some new things that we do that we either stop doing or start doing in order to be loved by God the way that you're defining.
Yeah, I mean, my ideal would be for them to be in a faith community where the gospel is preached regularly, where the implication of the gospel is the central message of every sermon. So it's not just like spiritual how-tos or spiritual like Tony Robbins kind of talks, but the gospel culminates in every sermon. Before that is the case, I would read some good books. I would listen to Timothy Keller. All his stuff's online. Go listen. And the courage is to recognize that you have unrest. And the promise Jesus says, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Don't stop looking until you find rest. And so the cycle I explain to people, the 4 stops on the cycle that get you moving. Awareness is number 1. Be willing to tell yourself the truth. I don't have peace. I don't have joy. I am defensive. I am angry. I am insecure. I am afraid. The second is confession. Confession just means own it. Yeah, that's true. I see diagnostically that I'm always putting my guard up with my friends or my spouse or my kids. I must be defensive. Own it. From confession, move to repentance, which is not just thinking about, I don't want to be defensive, but to actually like get yourself with the gospel and love going, even though I feel this way about myself, I'm loved and I feel peace. So the next time I interact with my wife or my kids or my neighbor or my coworker, I'm going to be ready with the gospel, if that makes sense, to like have and do it differently and visualize that differently and get a new identity with the gospel. And then refreshing with the gospel of grace. Man, God, you were so good gratitude. And the thing about that cycle, Joshua, is awareness, confession, repentance, refreshing brings you back to the top. Awareness again. And I'll leave with this. I know we're probably taking a lot of your time.
You're doing good.
Most people view their life like an XY chart. X or Y is the vertical is holiness or good or happy, and X is the time. And we just kind of like do this, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm happy. My 20s were good, my 30s were bad. I like to give people the spiral view. So for example, do you know how many lines are on an LP, like a vinyl record?
Man, can I guess?
Yeah, let's do it.
45.
45?
Is that too
You're
many?
way off.
Okay.
You're off by 44.
Okay. So 99? Oh, just one? Oh, and it goes around and around and around and around.
It goes on the outside. It goes around. It goes around. But what's it doing as it goes around?
It goes around 45 times.
There you go. But it's getting closer to the center, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And it's going faster. So as you awareness, humility to confess, courage to repent with the gospel fueling you, refreshed in grace with gratitude, you keep coming back around. God graciously keeps showing you the fears and darkness and insecurity, and he keeps shaping you. And you're not repeating. It's more like a spiral. You're going up. View life that way.
Yeah, so rich. And it's going to take time for me to even process. There's only one line on a record player.
You like that, don't you?
Yeah, but when we first met, you told me that you had an organization called Be One, Make One, and I immediately got it. Sometimes we're asked, how do we make disciples? And in order to make a disciple, you have to be one. Yeah. And so it all starts with who we are. And so we will teach what we know, but we will reproduce who we are. And spending time with Jesus has to be at the center of our lives. And the beauty is we don't have to beat ourselves up. We just have to turn back to him and receive his love and forgiveness. And so, Anthony, it's been a pleasure to share your story and to hear what God is doing in your life. I want to make sure that anyone that's listening or watching today is to remember is like Anthony is on a journey. He started at one moment of time coming from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light, and the progression of his faith have created a lifestyle of ministry where what he does connects directly to what he believes. And I want to encourage our listeners, does what you do and who you work for connect inside to what you believe in this life? And I want to invite you, there is a better journey. You can partner with God in your daily work. There was a famous, what was he, a monk? Do you remember the book that I'm about to go, Practicing the Presence of God?
Yeah, yes. That's Lawrence, right?
Yeah, Brother Lawrence. And this dude would practice the presence of God while he's washing the dishes or anything that he's doing throughout the day. And prayer doesn't have to be just around the kitchen table. Prayer does not have to just be at church. We're trying to send a message out that says, man, prayer is active and living anywhere you're breathing. You are in God's presence, and you can usher in the kingdom, which is his ways that we live our lives. And everything can be changed as a result of what the gospel has done. Not just Sunday morning, not just forgiveness, but to be on mission with Jesus. And so want to invite you to share this with a friend if you find it helpful. If there's anybody that's struggling with being loved, make sure you have them check this episode out. Maybe go to Be One, Make One. We'll put all the links inside of the show notes today. But until next time, Anthony, I love you, and I'll see you in the future.
And love you, bro.
Peace.
See you soon.
Later.